I've always dreamed of just doing Q&A. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to touch on 2 questions that are maybe questions your family has been asking. And we'll touch on them. One about school, one about entrepreneurism. Tune in.
Mama says namaste.
Mama says namaste.
Making a family can be easy and fun.
Oh yeah, but raising a family can be a whole different story.
From spouses to kids to the crazy daily grind, life often directs us away from connection and more into reactive chaos.
If you're tired of that cycle and are seeking something beyond the picket fence blues, this is the show for you.
I'm Ashley.
And I'm Nathan.
And we're here to take you from chaos to clarity by bringing awareness and intention into your home, not waiting for one day, and highlighting how
the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us.
Take a deep breath in and let's start a brand new day. With Mama says namaste.
All right. I've always wanted to do like a, what's it called? A
Q&A?
A Dear Abby.
Dear Abby.
I love the Dear Abby deal. Like, I love getting questions and answering questions. And we've talked about this before. We've done different things in the podcast before where we have answered a ton of listener questions. I remember when we were launching our 90-day family road trip course, which is the course that we have for families that are dreaming of hitting the road in an RV. And we have a whole course around that is really helping them ask the questions to really be prepared for not just RV travel, but living together in such a small
hanging out with your
space.
family in a tiny space.
Right. And during that time, we got inundated with questions. And so I had tons of questions to go through and answer, and I loved it. So I want to do it again. However, I don't have a ton of current questions to go through right now. And so I played with AI.
And what did the AI world wonder about?
All right. Well, I'm really learning how to use AI to help me. And I use it in a lot of different formats. So really, when it comes to the podcast, I pull stuff into Cast Magic, and then I do some AI magic from there to help me curate podcast titles and quotes to go with the podcast, and even to lay out a format for my blogging sometimes. So I'm learning all about how to use it to my advantage. And I know that there are people that may be not so sure about AI, but I have to say, I mean, the past 18 months have shifted so much.
Well, I don't think it's as big as, I think there's some dangers, but I don't know if it's as scary as everybody made it out to be.
I feel like when used effectively, what AI does is it allows us to move to a higher level of thinking ourselves, because it takes some of the grunt work out and allows us to be more creative. And so, for example, like last week when I wrote the blog, I asked AI to prompt with what my speaking points were based on the episode that we had created. And then I was able to write with the outline already formatted for me. And so I've learned that the biggest way for AI to work for you is to learn how to give it the right prompts. So that's what I was playing with today. And so I worked with, I kind of laid out what our podcast is, what our dreams are, and what topics we talk about in the podcast. And then I kind of laid out just kind of our ideal family avatar. And who are the people that are listening to our podcast? Who are the people that we can help? Well,
and what did it say?
Well, first off, I want to kind of describe what that is before we get into what the questions were.
Let's do it.
The people that we imagine that are listening to Mama Says Namaste podcast are those of you who are potentially craving something outside of the box. You're looking outside of the norm of the traditional job, public school, 9 to 5, house with a picket fence. And so you're looking beyond that. And we have a lot of topics that we cover and that we address that may be something that you're craving more of in your life. Maybe you're craving more simplicity, a little bit more of a minimalistic lifestyle. Not necessarily full minimalism, but a more simple life. Mm-hmm. Maybe you are frustrated with your children's schooling options and you're looking for schooling alternatives. And we talk about functional education and how with functional education, we believe that that is a lifelong journey, and we are right there along with our children, learning alongside them. And we talk about the alternative schooling models that can help to support that.
Well, I mean, we talk about personality styles, also the importance of, understanding each other and ourselves as we're navigating through.
Right, and
this
just
life.
discussing marriage and parenting
Yep.
in relation especially to those personality styles and how we may trigger reactive behavior in each other just from having different personality perspectives on it.
'Cause I know it sounds like we get along great, but Ashley and I disagree on quite a many things.
Quite a many.
Quite a many.
Including how to phrase that sentence.
I think it was phrased perfectly.
So there's a lot of different areas that we touch on. And we touch on full-time RV travel because that's what our family does. So we talk about having maybe a location-independent lifestyle with your family.
Talk about food and diet.
We talk about food and diet a lot, simply because that's something that we're passionate about. We believe in, as much as we can, having a minimal impact when it comes to our food and looking at what is the most healthy for our body. So we're looking at how it impacts the environment, how it impacts our bodies, and what it is that we're putting into it. And that's definitely been a great learning opportunity for our whole family as we've dug into that together.
Sure. So you put all that stuff in about us.
Yes, so I put all this stuff in about us and all of these different areas that we would love to talk more about. And I asked it to curate some questions that may be from a family like yours that's listening in, that's looking for some insight. And so we're just pulling 2 questions, and I just want to play with it. 2 questions podcast and see what all we can cover, and also hopefully prompt you to think of your own questions, send them in. And I won't just work with AI, and I'll be working with your specific personal questions. I used to have a whole lot of these personal questions, and we've gone through a lot of them. And getting into, what is it, our 29th episode, I think, of the podcast here, we're ready for some new, fresh questions that are relevant to right now in 2023 as you're listening to this, as we wrap up 2023. So, we're going to go into these questions, and if you have a question, simply go to mamasaysnamaste.com. There's a big contact right there on the top menu. You can hit contact and you can submit any question you have for me, and I will personally respond back to you, and there is a chance you may get to hear it on the podcast.
If you're brave, put it out there.
And if you're not so brave, just put anonymous,
there
and
you
we'll
go.
still cover it.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so here are 2 questions for this week. Number 1, how can we create a structured and supportive learning environment for our children outside of traditional schooling?
Impossible.
I like this question because it also is relevant for anybody. Doesn't matter what your children are doing, because some of the people who might ask a question like this have their kids in traditional schooling. They just want to look for a supportive learning environment outside of it.
Yeah.
And then some of you who are listening are thinking, well, I'm homeschooling or I'm unschooling, and I've got to figure out how to add education in.
Yeah. And to me, it's really simple. You just start to look at what the child is interested in and kind of build off of there. I mean, even if somebody is very physically driven and, is fascinated with, sport like soccer or lacrosse, there's tons of books that you can learn about how to maximize your abilities and things like that can kind of pull a child in to figure out, like, how can I blend these things that I love with the things that I need to kind of master and grow from.
Yes. So as you're talking about, the first step is really asking questions of our kids. It's pulling out their curiosity, because you're going to have way more success in their growth when they are naturally curious about it, when they really want to know. Just as we as an adults, think about what you learn. How much do you learn by force as an adult versus learn out of curiosity and interest?
Well, we always encourage our children to do what they love, because they'll never work a day in their life. But then we're like, but you have to slug through, fill in the blank. And so, there is some, every day is an opportunity to kind of show your child the reality of not just, what are multiplication tables, but how are you using this stuff every single day? So they see the purpose in, okay, fractions are valuable because If I want to bake and I enjoy
Right.
baking, I need to understand fractions. Or if I enjoy mechanics, I need to understand fractions and how to measure. And so, there's all different ways to pull in what I call functional education on a daily basis. And a lot of it is just having the bandwidth that we as parents have to manage so that we can bring somebody alongside who knows nothing about what we're doing and take the time to say, hey, here's how I balance a checkbook. Hey, here's how we do the grocery shopping. Hey, here's how we do laundry.
You're right. So there's two parts to the question. The first part of the question is creating that learning environment. And that's exactly what you're talking about. It's creating that learning environment by following their passions, their interests, digging into it, and helping to connect the why, like why these things are important. If they love, building Legos, then as they go into building, you can start looking at the calculations of math and why learning geometry may help them with what it is they're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And so once you can start to connect the dots with their passions and where something is needed, then it goes into what you're talking about a little bit with the work ethic aspect of it. And so the other part of that question was, how can we create a structured and supportive learning? So we've got supportive learning here. So how do we add the structure? And
what do you think?
I was going to say, and I so have an opinion on this.
I bet you do.
And I will share in the blog that goes along with this. I will share the video I share so often. It's by Stephen Covey, and he wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he has a video from ages ago about big rocks and little rocks. And we have shown it to our children, and we talk about it a ton. And what it is talking about putting the big rocks for the day in first, knocking out the big priorities first before you fill it with all the little incidentals. And so, we're working on that with our kids again right now, with helping them to remember, because sometimes it can be easy to, especially in our lifestyle where it's very unpredictable with what we're doing week to week. Sometimes in our travels, it can be easy to kind of fall into vacation mode and just wake up in the morning and lounge around and play and maybe get into drawing. And all of a sudden the whole day is gone and they've never touched anything as far as con or something that's a challenge. And that's really where I push the kids, is because I say, when was the last time you challenged yourself? Because in the challenges are those opportunities for growth. And sometimes challenge is just having work ethic. Sometimes it's learning something new that may be hard to do. And so we want to push for those opportunities. And so we've gone through the why Khan is helpful for them. And our older girls really recognize that Khan Academy, which is a completely free online program, really helps to keep them on track, to continue to keep moving forward. It helps them to see some element of grading so they understand kind of if they're comprehending it. And it helps them to think critically, because it's more about helping them to learn how to solve a problem versus actually solving the problem.
Right.
And so when we look at structure for homeschooling or for learning at home, what I'm looking at for structure is, what are the big rocks of the day? What are the opportunities that we want to knock out and go ahead and prioritize into our schedule? And that's where we add the structure. I add structure for big rocks. It's the anchors of the day. Those are we need to accomplish this. I've got one coaching client and one project that I need to do today. And those are my main focuses. And once I'm done, we're good. Or the girls, you've got your con, and Claire's got another dragon order. She is making dragons out the wazoo with crochet right now, getting ready for Christmas and all of her orders. And so we knock out the big rocks. I don't even need to schedule the little rocks. Little rocks will happen. They'll fill in everything.
Yeah. Well, and, to me, the biggest work that has to be done, the scheduling piece, is in the parental department. And that's really, from my perspective, managing the energy to have the time to give them, what the day is going to require to get them to have that structure. Where if your mind is off thinking about all the problems of the day, rather than present with your children saying, hey, this is how my day goes and this is how I manage it. If all they do is see you throwing balls up in the air and barely be able to catch them, then you can expect them to behave the same way with their schooling. That's just kind of fair. And so if you're not being present and accounting for that time, for that opportunity to thread in the creativity of, the joy of learning into your interactions. To me, that's the structure, is being aware of the serendipity that's there. Like aware of that there is no structure if you can control your structure that you got spinning around in your mind.
Clear as mud.
Does that make well? So, like a lot of times as parents, we can get really, really distracted and so the structure, the opportunities to teach our kids, they might say, "What are you doing?" "I'm paying bills." So that's how you respond, as opposed to if you have time in your life and you're present, your kid says, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm paying bills." "Did you know that this house doesn't just run off of rainbows and butterflies, but it actually runs off of cold hard cash?" Which is why, and so just kind of explaining economics to them. And so if you're not coming with a full cup prepared for that, the structures, because those opportunities aren't just structured, they don't just show up. They come in the random moments and the questions that are not really convenient. And so if you can structure your life so that you can handle those inconvenient questions, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Then the serendipity of those learning opportunities is available to you.
So we just kind of added a two-part to the two-part question already.
I guess so.
Yeah,
it's just how I would see the question. I see your structure, totally. And to me, learning doesn't occur like, okay, from 10 to 12, we're going to figure out economics. And then, because that's when I do it.
It's not compartmentalized like
They're
that.
true curious, because they don't, they might be doing other things, drawing, and you're pulling them away from them. But if they walk up to you and they say, "What are you doing?" Or "How do you make bread?" "I'm curious." "Oh, well, here's how you make bread. Do you understand fractions? Have you gotten into that?" "I've been avoiding it." Perfect. So, it's that kind of opportunity to me.
I love that. Yeah, I think both can be valued, and it really is, to your point, started by the parents. When we did the structure of 7 to 8 in the morning being reading hour. We've lost all structure of that being around that exact time frame, but we have been pretty consistent with still getting up and prioritizing some reading in the morning, and us doing it by example versus telling our kids you have to read when you first wake up. They follow our lead, and so they see us reading and they get up and they read. So
and things get out of whack, and so when they do, we just say, "Man, let's reinstitute."
Right.
Or be stricter with.
So I guess the structure is very loose. The structure is more about the big rock priorities for you as adults and for your children. So when we look at structure, it doesn't have to be the solid schedule that you follow to a T, as much as it is looking at the priorities of your life and how you can make space for that. And so for us as adults, we're making space in structuring our life in a way that we have that opportunity to share with our children and be available when they're ready to learn. And for our kids, we're helping them to see and understand how to prioritize the big things that do need to be done during the day.
Well, and to your point, you're defining the big rocks.
Yeah.
And so I'm switching the definition of those big rocks as, the presence and the awareness, the energy management of what those rocks do are more important to me than
the actual big rocks.
Than the actual rocks themselves. Because there is always drama.
Yeah.
And if you want to be a drama king or queen, you can that's easy. No problem. There's lots of followers. But that's what real estate taught me is I can stress about there being fires going on, or I can recognize that there's always a fire cooking.
Yeah.
And I can either be a cool fireman, or I can be a crazy person losing my hair with the people that are afraid the world's burning down.
Yeah.
But it all has to do with how you control yourself and manage yourself. And so.
Yeah.
But structure is really valuable. I mean, I'm not saying that structure is not valuable. I mean, well, here's what I was talking about. I was talking about the time management and how with Ellie, I let her struggle and determine her own time for a long time. For about 1.5 years, she was behind in school, and I let her determine and make her own choices. And I would challenge her on her choices and say things like, "Do you enjoy the way this feels?" Because I know that it's not fun to have to do things that you don't want to do when everybody that you want to hang out with is doing fun stuff. And so I know that's not fun. the way that I avoid that, and I've managed that in my life, is I get as much as I can of that world done first thing in the morning so that I've got the rest of the day to do what I want. And so she started to practice that and started to see the fruits of that. And, she will ebb and flow with that, but she started to recognize that I can really, I can be productive when I choose to be. And that's all I want her to know. That way, it's an easy conversation that I can walk by and say, Ellie, are you choosing to be productive, or are you choosing to mess around? Yeah. And it's on her. It's not me being the mean parent saying, here's the lesson in the madness. I'm a big proponent of bringing our kids alongside us and sharing as much that's, appropriate for them to understand what the world is that they're getting into. Because I think we do a disservice when we create the Santa Claus effect for our children, where as long as you know your multiplication tables and you've taken the ACT, you'll be okay. Well, life is very different than that.
All right. So as you can see, a lot of times the questions go deeper into what is your mindset and approach around it versus just the actions that you do. So our second question here is, what strategies can we implement to involve our children in our entrepreneurial ventures and cultivate their entrepreneurial spirit? I think you've done a good job of kind of hitting the nail on the head with this already in how you've said it's them coming alongside you. We have definitely seen this and done this with our children as they are curious about what I'm doing as an entrepreneur, and I have them sit down next to me and I show them what I'm creating, what I'm developing, what I'm stuck on, what I'm pondering. And as they've gotten older, they've actually stepped in and done jobs for me and been able to be involved in the family businesses that we're involved in. And it's been really cool to invite them in.
It's very important to let your kids see how life works. And in the entrepreneurial world, I feel like sometimes there's a lot of pizzazz of like, well, I have my own schedule, and that's kind of the sell of that side of the world of, nobody's telling me when I got to work.
Right.
Well, that's because you work all the time.
Yes.
And so, it's a paradigm that I think it's important for your children to recognize and be a part of, and understand the economics of how your version of the game is made. And so we share and are very candid with our girls about, well, our houses need to rent for this much so that we can continue to live this life. If it doesn't happen that way, then we have to readjust that. And so they understand the ebbs and flows of entrepreneurship, because you don't want them to get out there and just think that, well, I just get to make my own, I can play Frisbee whenever I want and go and do whatever I want, because that's not.
They see the real life of where my time is spent and what I need to do. And I'm very clear when I let them know, I need to remove myself right now and focus on work. And I do a barrier around sometimes when I need to focus and concentrate. And then there are other times where I'm bringing them in. And another aspect of this is how to foster that entrepreneurial spirit for your children can have nothing to do with actually an entrepreneurial world. Yeah. It can be something like, Mommy, I want a dog. Oh, that's interesting. How are you going to make that happen? Well, just asking for it? No. I mean, my goodness, when our kids wanted an animal, when Clara wanted a fish, she ended up submitting, a 20-page report to us on everything about the fish. And that meant that she went down the path of knowing the history of the fish. She knew the different species. She knew how to breed them. She knew how to train them, how to have fun with them, how to decorate their aquarium, how to care for them, all of their food. And then she went so far as to go on and price check all of the expenses that would be needed in order for her to have a fish, and then look at what would be the maintenance then, what would be her expenses to actually continue to own the fish. Well, all of those are incredible entrepreneurial skills for her to recognize the work that it takes and the education that it takes in order to be prepared to make a proposal and be responsible for that.
Exactly. And that's the life lesson that will be repeated in, varying scales of intensity throughout her life. Well, I need to understand how this works so that I can know what I'm getting into. And that's what we want our children to start to build those habits, because even like you said before, regardless of where you work, you're always kind of an entrepreneur. You're always a salesman. You're selling yourself and your ideas and what you can bring to the table and contribute to a whole or something greater than yourself. And helping your kids see the different avenues and options of that. Even if it's, I was thinking a great way to kind of help somebody get a first step in there is to volunteer at, pet shelters or anywhere really, just to volunteer where you have to work with other people to accomplish a task. That's a great practice in entrepreneurship because that's what you're oftentimes doing. You're tossed in an environment with people you've never met before, and you guys have to accomplish something. Because it's usually not just the entrepreneur doing something. It's, multiple people making that happen.
Right. And oftentimes as an entrepreneur, you may have, instead of that one boss that can fire you, you're selling to the public, and you've got, 5,000 quote unquote bosses that can fire you, walk away at any point. And so understanding marketing and sales is very valuable. And so, just we cultivate the growth mindset more than the entrepreneurial mindset. The entrepreneurial mindset to me is very much very much a growth mindset. So when our children come to us with any desire, then we say, how can you make that happen? How can you make it work? And look for what opportunities to be creative and innovate and figure out how to put legs on their desires.
And sometimes the failure is the win. I've had great conversations with Clara, who let go of a dream after she did a business proposal on it, just to recognize that, there's a lot of different ways to make money. And
when she started to put the finances together, she realized what a drain it can be and how much expense and overhead can go into building, for example, a brick and mortar business. I think she was looking at a pet sitting facility. Yeah.
And so, it helped. I mean, for me, if you can help your kids know what they don't want to do, that's almost as good, if not better, than helping them find out what they do.
Clear. We have a negativity bias, and so we can get very clear on what things are not in our sweet spot as we try to muscle through and as we don't come out on top for everything. It's great opportunities for lessons learned.
Yep.
All right, so those are 2 questions for this week. I would love to do more of these, and I definitely have more questions that we can pull from just from AI. So I have this set where we can do this for a while now, but I want to hear from you. What question do you have specifically for your family and the dream you want? What is it that is still keeping you from that life you don't want to escape from? What is that one thing that you are tolerating right now or that you are feeling stuck or overwhelmed with that may help to have a little bit of extra insight on? Again, just go to mamasaysnamaste.com and click on the contact right at the top menu bar and reach out and let us know what your question is. And as I said, I will respond back and I will let you know when we do answer it on the podcast as well. So until then, enjoy the rest of your week. Think about what life makes possible for you in growth and discovery with your family this week. And remember to celebrate how
the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us. Namaste.
1, 2, 3. Up with the rising sun, already on the run. Mama says namaste. Life is a tangled mess, and you don't have to stress. Mama says namaste. 'Cause today I will stand up and be all the change that I want to see in this world. Boys and girls, you gotta have to stand up to be free. Namaste in your heart. Take a deep breath in and let's start a brand new day. With Mama says namaste.